This podcast is supported by Wesleyan Financial Services, providers of specialist financial advice to members of the legal profession. Wesleyan's team of dedicated experts have been helping law firms and their employees achieve financial well-being over many years, providing personal and commercial financial advice, in-firm seminars and online guidance. Strategic partners with the Law Society, Wesleyan is proud of its partnership with Women in the Law UK. If you are looking to make investments or financial plans, talk to a qualified financial advisor. For more information about Wesleyan, visit wesleyan.co.uk, or to arrange a financial education event in your firm or a no-obligation financial health check, connect with Sarah Deacon, Wesleyan Area Manager, on LinkedIn.
Hello, and welcome to a new episode of Talking Law. I am Sally Penny, barrister, Kenworthy's Chambers. I'm the founder of Women in the Law and Business UK, and I am the Vice Chair of the Association of Women Barristers. Women in the Law is a professional development organisation passionate about developing the next leaders in law. You can find out more at womeninthelawuk.com. You can also buy the Talking Law book, with all profits going to 5 charities, including the Fawcett Society. That book is Talking Law by Sally Penny and is available on Amazon. Now, on to my guest this month, Judge Rinder. I started by asking him, given his many talents for singing and dancing, writing, why it was he started a career in law.
You know, I ended up in the law really through a series of accidents. I went to university at a time of real privilege, and that privilege was that it was free.
Yeah.
And so I left with £1,100 worth of debt. I went and did politics and modern history with no real intention of doing the law. I mean, it was a possibility, certainly.
Yes.
But I didn't really know much about it. And then kind of what happened is I really thought I'd become an actor because I'd been in National Youth Theatre. And I've told this story several times, but I was up here in Manchester, where I'd really deliberately chosen to go, And that was because, my heroine, the person who changed my life, was my teacher, Jackie Grice.
Wow.
And, I'd not been really great at school, certainly until I was sort of 15. I was a little bit ahead.
Yes.
And I'd given kind of childhood my undivided indifference. And then when I was about sort of 15, she sort of looked at me and said, you're quite clever. And from that point, she sort of became not just my role model, but my sort of everything. And she'd gone to Manchester. So I thought, well, that sounds great. And done politics and modern history. I came here. It was the 90s. It was a fantastic old time. The first play I auditioned for in Manchester, I thought I'd done rather well. I think, it was The Front Page was the play. And I'd read for Hildy, and I thought, that was all right. I mean, I was never a great actor. I was in National Youth Theatre, as I say, and there were some famous people. I thought, I could probably tread a board or two. But then the next person came along and read, and I thought, gosh, that's the real deal, like touching the face of real talent. And that was Benedict Cumberbatch.
Oh, my gosh.
I know. And so after that point, I thought, not much point, really. I knew I'd never have a career beyond, Heartbeat and the odd fifth-rate part in Emmerdale if I was lucky, a walk-on job. And I ended up getting involved with debating.
Yes.
And that was my entree into law. My debating partner and I became sort of quite good at it fairly quickly. He was infinitely better at me. He was infinitely better than me. And I sort of, I suppose, was elevated to his standard. He raised the game. And we started winning into varsity competitions.
Wow.
All right. I mean, he was really good. And then at that point, sort of the people that we were in each weekend at these competitions, the milieu, if you like, the kind of next thing, the ipso facto, was that you would become a barrister.
Yes.
Because all of the law schools were debating. We used to debate against Inner Temple.
Yeah.
A couple of them have now become High Court judges, which is interesting to see how their careers have gone on.
Yes.
And so I sort of thought, well, okay, I'll have a go at this. I sort of crept, or really, I suppose you might say, I walked, is that the past participle of sleepwalk? My way into it. It's so different now.
Yes.
I didn't have a driving ambition, but that was because I was free not to have that driving ambition.
Yeah.
I wasn't saddled or, suffocated with debt. By the time I finished university with £1,100 worth of debt, I was free enough to be able to make some choices.
Yes, absolutely.
So I went to City Law School because I thought, well, I'll do the law conversion. And I applied for criminal chambers because that's what most of the people I debated with had decided to do. And I want to be clear at that point. I think I'd been to court once. I'd certainly never seen a criminal trial. I'd done zilch work experience. You know, granted this was last century.
Yes.
But God, it really does expose just how different things are now. And I applied for a pupillage at the chambers of the late Sir Desmond de Silva.
Oh, wow.
Right. And of course, it was just like debating.
Yes.
So a plea in mitigation, which I'd never seen, but I sort of read about it at that point, was just like making submissions, you know, triaging your best points and then selling the argument to the tribunal.
Yes.
And so that went down rather well. And the interesting thing was they took 5 pupils at that time.
Wow.
Right, because you could. And the result of funding pupils has been an interesting one, and no doubt we'll come on to it in terms of its impact on diversity.
Yes.
But it is an interesting thing that in our year, they took 5 of us. 2 were funded, me and my now very close friend. I say we were funded, we were paid $7,500 for 6 months.
Crikey, it's more than that now.
Right, it's a little bit more than that. And then, you know, you're on your own. You eat what you kill in your second 6 months. The other 3 were not funded, and the other 3 are still in the law. My friend and I are not. And the other 3 are doing incredible things.
Wow.
One really very senior at the Revenue, one who's got a stellar career dealing with proceeds of crime.
Wow.
And it was interesting because all 3 of them, I think now, looking at how challenging it's become, how utterly challenging and difficult it's become to get pupillage, almost certainly wouldn't get it nowadays.
No.
You know, I came from what you might loosely describe as a traditional background. I look the way I look. I sound the way I sound. Sure, it's a creation, which I invented by the time I was 13, in opposition to the working class upbringing I had, I suppose, to some extent. I'm my own special creation, you might say.
Well, you're very, very much admired.
That's one way. But that was the thing, you know, and I got a first, and so I ticked the boxes.
Absolutely. But that was through hard work.
Yeah, that's true. But, you know, anyone can read a book and do well in exams. And yeah, I suspect possibly now I'd edge or elbow my way into a pupillage, but I had no experience. I didn't know what court looked like.
Yes.
I wasn't able meaningfully or effectively to demonstrate that I had a passion for the career. You know, I just knew I wanted to be an advocate. And that was, you know, writ large when I ended up going to my first trial as a pupil, and I couldn't understand why it was that the prosecutor and the police officer were reading out the interview. I thought that was very strange. Apparently that happened in every trial. It was actually Sarah Whitehouse who was doing that trial. I think she's now in Silk.
She is actually. I think she's Treasury Counsel, actually.
She is Treasury Counsel. I remember the case. So I'm sorry, Sarah. You know, but the thing was, the extraordinary thing was that the passion came after I started.
Yes. Yeah.
Again, that was a gift. So I could meander my way into this gift of a career. And then it was probably about 7 or 8 months in when I was doing my own cases. It's twofold. There's a kind of macro and the micro. You know, the micro stuff is a little bit egotistical. You know, you get your first client off and there's a little thwack of endorphin. You know, I won my first trial. It all went downhill from there, but I did. And I thought, God, this is great. But then there was this moment, for me, a genuine, real deal epiphany, which was that I suddenly had this moment of appreciating how important the job was. I never came with a deep-seated mission, the idea that I wanted to be a prosecutor or defence counsel.
Yes.
And I can't actually remember the case. I'd be lying if I said I could. It was a series of cases where I realised that I realised, it sounds so silly now perhaps, that I was standing between the individual and the state, and that mattered. And then I really thought back to my grandfather, who was a Holocaust survivor. That really mattered to me. He lost his 4 sisters and his brother, and his parents were murdered in the Second World War, and he survived the camps and came to the UK in 1946 along with 732 others to Windermere. They've just made a film about it. And he convalesced here. And this is really, England was gifted to him.
Yeah.
And that's how he felt. And he felt this passion. it permeated through him. It was like the golden thread. Sometimes, trite lawyers use that as their closing submission.
Yeah.
But for him, it was woven into the tapestry that he was cloaked in. And I never thought much about it. It was like, dot drawing. When he used to take my brother and I to Speaker's Corner, this was back in the day before Twitter, when, cruelty had a face, and you could at least know who was saying these vile things.
Yeah.
And we would stand and listen to the most cruel and appalling anti-Semitic bile and never get it. He would say, you'll see in this country, he would say, this man can say what he wants. And, to be present alongside somebody who had quite literally touched the face of tyranny.
Yes.
Who absolutely understood that the rule of law wasn't something. It was absolutely everything. Everything to him.
Yes.
He loved the country, and above all else, he loved that he lived in a country of laws. And I think as I represented more and more people, I became more and more passionate about that and about chiefly defending. And I ended up defending in some extraordinary cases. Even when I first started, there are memorable ones. I represented the National Front once.
Wow.
You can imagine that being a good gay Jew.
Yeah.
And and he did
it's quite
say
difficult. I mean, we talk about the cab rank rule at the bar, but was that difficult? Did you think about that at the time?
No, not for a second.
Exactly, because often we just do the cases.
Completely, there was no part of me that wasn't totally shielded, cushioned in the idea, in the absolute fundamental importance and truth that even that person, whatever their political stripe or view, didn't just deserve a defence, but that was critical, necessary, everything.
Yes.
When he used, the F word, I think, and the Y word, I know. And I thought to myself, that's what he said to me. We're really glad you're here because all that solicitor does is send me, I'm going to use the bad language. And I said, I remembered thinking I should do jazz hands and say oy vey.
Yeah.
But, the other thing, of course, that it taught me, which was a gift later on, and I suspect a lot of defence, a lot of criminal lawyers, in fact, lawyers in general probably feel this, certainly criminal lawyers. These were not happy humans.
No.
You must have experienced this. Anybody that's got residual energy in their life for cruelty, unkindness, hate, and wants to do that anonymously on Twitter, let alone to family and friends, isn't a happy individual.
No.
You're sitting up all night, chain smoking parliaments and wearing a muumuu.
Yeah, you're absolutely spot
on. And so whenever I meet that kind of unkindness, which is just about the worst thing I can say about somebody, I think they're unkind. It says everything, unkind. I never think that they're happy people, and that always cushions the blow of their unkindness.
Yes, yeah. I think I will probably say other things, but I know that we've got students who listen to this podcast. Right. Can I ask you then about how it was? You had a hugely successful career at the bar. How it was that you came to leave and become hugely successful on our television screens and on our radio? Well,
I'm going to say luck to both things. And, you might be overstating my huge success at the bar. I mean, I did okay. But I had a lot of luck and a lot of role models and, a lot of people helping me along the way. And the thing I love about the bar most is it is, oh God, brace yourself for this word, collegiate.
Yes, yeah.
It's my learned friend. And boy, did I have friends that pushed me and elevated me and made me better. I had luck early on because I did one case. I was defending in some magistrate's court, and there was a very influential solicitor, Mohammed Nasser. I hope he's listening. And I think I'd given a police officer a hard time. I can't even remember. My pupil master was rather good at this sort of thing. It was never about the questions. It was always about positioning the water, just because it would annoy the police officer. So you'd get the upper hand. This was, of course, back in the days when eyewitnesses mattered. Nowadays, forget about it. It's all technical. By the time you come to court, it's much more challenging and less fun than it used to be.
Yeah.
And he then instructed me on a series of really high-profile cases in Birmingham when I was only about 4 years cool. And once you get your break in that way, the luck continues to build in calm.
Wow.
And so, I did a number of these cases. By the word did. I mean, I was privileged to do. I learned so much from, brilliant silks who have led me, too many to name, but, mentors, people like Sally Bennett-Jenkins in my chambers and, Jane Humphreys at 3 Raymond Buildings. I think of Sally. She'll probably remember this. The last case I did, the last criminal case, was in 2010, and it was a murder trial. And I would always try, if she was available, she's always far too busy, to get Sally to lead me. And the reason for that was, by the time 2010 came along, as we were just discussing, the reality was, or is, that the technical evidence, let's call it that, the objective stuff, was pretty overwhelming. You had CCTV evidence, you had telephone cell site evidence, computer evidence. So let's face it, by the time your client was facing that murder charge, it was a much greater uphill struggle. And what Sally, who'd been Treasury Counsel, and by the way also having had 6 children, triplets, twins and one, I sometimes go and troll Mum's Net and pretend I'm Sally Bennett-Jenkins just to see what people will do. To see the rage ensue, Anyway, she absolutely understood and taught me. Oh, did she teach me? She taught me to always remember the victims, to be sure, but also the defendant's family. And she would find time always to explain with such care and such emotional intelligence and range what was happening, to include everybody. It's a funny story. When she was leading me in one of these cases, the clerk in, I can't remember what court it was, the Old Bailey, came over and said, "Oh, Mr. Rinder." I said, "Yes." She said, "Do you know, it was so lovely the way you were looking at Miss Bennett-Jenkins." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "It reminded me of the way Nancy Reagan used to look at Ronald Reagan." And apparently during her closing submission to the jury, I was just sat behind Sally looking in total bewildered awe, going, "Yes." So, luck, really. And then in about 2006, the kind of commercial turbulence, I'll call it that, of the slow and cruel, unnecessary and frightening death of legal aid began to really bite. And I became sort of interested in proceeds of crime stuff. So I wrote this little tome about money laundering.
Yes.
And I became sort of interested in that, really because it struck me that was how, finance, that was how terrorists and all criminal swill got about, that we needed to be focusing on the money. Also, I was quite sort of naturally talented at that sort of thing. And I never say that about myself, but I could open accounts. I'm useless in my own personal finances, but I could open accounts and very quickly tell you whether they were kosher or not.
Yeah, interesting.
It's an interesting thing. I don't know why, but I suppose I had a sort of affinity for it. So I ended up doing this book and then kind of did back-to-back money laundering cases. I moved chambers. At that point, the head of chambers was David Waters, QC, that went on to become the brilliant Orlando Pownell and is now Johnny Laidlaw. I mean, and I'm incredibly proud of my chambers, just how, not just kind they've been, but, it's interesting when you go to a place where everybody's the best at what they do. It's interesting how you find, almost what's a good way of describing bitchiness? Well, I just did. There's none of that stuff.
Yes.
It's a lovely environment because they're gainfully employed and just great.
Yes, and you don't need it.
You don't need
it. What's the point?
Right, and surrounded by, people at that level. Every single person there was just fantastic, is fantastic. I had a criminal defence practice. And then in 2010, some people may know, because the trial's still ongoing, 10 years later, the government of the Turks and Caicos came a-knocking. Now, I say they came a-knocking. When I went to interview for this job with Helen Garlick, who was the previous director of overseas corruption at the SFO, I didn't know where the Turks and Caicos was. The only reason I'd heard of it is because I used to watch Miss World. I know it's not PC, but this is when I was a child, and I used to keep records of it. And it was true, and there was always Miss Turks and Caicos. Right, that's
right.
Right. But I thought, well, that sounds like a good job. And it was an interesting opportunity. And the interesting part of it was that I had very much become a poacher, turned gamekeeper.
Yeah.
Because this was the first serious prosecution I'd ever been involved in. And the idea was, and it was a real gift of an experience, was to go out SFO model style, where barristers work alongside the police officers, really to build a case. And my practice up to that point had chiefly been looking and prodding at weaknesses in large cases to try and, win abusive process arguments. Very hard to do, but I used to enjoy that kind of aspect of technical law. And so I went to the Turks and Caicos Islands and worked for the better part of 4 years off and on there, alongside, at the time, police officers that had certainly never met anybody like me. And you could tell this sort of curious look that they gave me. And, a lot of them had been police officers who had retired many years ago. And at first they were dubious, but I always forgive that as long as they gift me the opportunity of letting me show them what I can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they did. And we became really great friends. And having built this prosecution and worked effectively alongside, these partners, these police officers, I then came back to do a case in Croydon. Now, there's nothing wrong with Croydon. I'm sure it's lovely at the right time of year, and sunshine can make anything look beautiful. But when I came back to defend in this case, there's a lovely Yiddish phrase, the koyach. I'd lost the guts to go and defend. I hadn't become a prosecutor necessarily as such, through and through, but when I had a client where the evidence was overwhelming, and every day I was instructed to go and run this abuse argument or that abuse argument, to do this job, you have to get up and believe in it 100%.
Yes.
You have to delight in the importance of what you're doing. And if you don't, the emotional capital you have, like little financial currency, little finite amounts of coins perhaps, goes bankrupt fairly quickly, if not very quickly. And I used to get up every morning and trudge my way from North London to Croydon and just feel totally and utterly depleted and miserable and out of love, and especially out of passion with the job. And you can't do it.
No.
You have to believe in it. It doesn't have to be perfect every day. It doesn't have to be perfect every week or even month, but you have to, or every month, but you have to believe that there's a possibility that round the corner there's going to be a good case.
Yes.
And it's going to matter. And I guess I'd lost that. And around that time, luck.
Wow.
I was, just for fun, writing show formats. I was trying to bring back Crown Court from the 1970s.
Oh.
Right. You're too young to remember that.
I know,
surely.
but I've heard so many of my guests here have told me I've actually been watching it. It's bloody good.
Right. It is pretty good, I think. So I've been trying to bring it back, mainly because I've got a lot of out-of-work actor friends. And I thought it would just be perfect for them.
Well, not Benedict. He's not out of work ever.
Well, he's doing all right, but, sexiest man in the world. I mean, it's different when you've known someone from when they're 18, I suppose. They all had keys to my house because I was the first one to buy a house.
Oh, right.
I know. What can I tell you? Anyway, so I guess, it was luck. I ended up writing this show format and went to flog it along with this production company to somebody at ITV. I had no idea who she was, and I never care about that sort of thing. I'm just myself. And she read it, and she looked at me, slightly perplexed, and said, that is the worst thing I've ever read. I thought, fair enough. Made me laugh. She was perfectly right, of course. And I thought, well, that's funny. And, I like somebody because she's forthright. And I thought, that's great. And she's honest, which, as I came to discover in TV is a challenging thing to find. They find language and have meetings.
Oh, yeah.
It's very unlawyerly.
We want a conference.
Right.
Get on with it.
Exactly. They just like meetings. And also as a barrister, you're somebody who ultimately makes the decision.
Absolutely. And they're there for you. You're the leader.
Right, there it's musical chairs in television, whilst, they kind of work out who's going to be responsible for the thing if it goes wrong and take the credit if it goes well. No criticism to telefolk, but you know who you are. That's how it goes. Excuse me. Excuse me. She said it was dreadful, and I came away really liking her. I love that sort of thing. And I discovered she'd written these novels, which she self-describes as chick lit. I don't really like that way of describing that sort of literature because I think it's fun and great. Well, it was an education to me, put it that way. You know the expression, you might read the brochure, it doesn't mean you're going on the package holiday.
Yeah.
Well, it was a lot of learning. And I wrote a review of her book, and Lovely to Meet You. And she said randomly, there's a guy in Manchester, he's not met anybody, he's quite keen to do a court show. It would be an arbitration. Do you think you could do it? And I said, yeah, I'll go up to Manchester. Why not? And I met him. And this was a strange thing. She turned out to be the head of Dame Time.
Wow.
I had no idea how unusual this is, but usually from the germ of possibility of a show to get it on telly, it takes years because they have to, market test you and people have to say, you look like Max Schmeling, we don't want you on telly and this sort of thing. What are you thinking? No, that sort of thing. And of course, it didn't happen in that way. She commissioned 20 shows with just us doing like a 2-minute pilot thing.
Wow.
Well, she was an extraordinary maverick. Her name is Helen Warner.
Interesting, a lot of the role models and the people, we are predominantly women's organisation, but we have loads of men. A lot of women have had a huge impact and not influence, but being role models in your career, which is interesting.
Completely the case.
Yes. Did you have quite a forthright mother? I know you talked about your grandfather.
Yeah, to say the very least. I was brought up by a single mum.
Yeah.
A single mum who found herself a single mum when I think I was 5 and my brother was 7. And, I never liked to describe her. I try to use her language, but she, describes herself as a Städtelfrau, that sort of Yiddish for, being a small town person who really had little formal education. And she went back and retrained, became a financial advisor.
Wow.
And within 10 years ended up running a big publishing company. And then my grandma would pick us up from school and feed us, and my aunt was around the corner.
Wow.
Enveloped by incredibly strong women, also who have gone on, again, brace yourself, real journeys, especially my mum. She has gone on a cultural journey, an intellectual one, a spiritual one.
Wow.
And grown, which is the greatest gift of all, as we have. The greatest privilege of all of the privileges we have, and there are many, but in my case, it's to be loved by somebody who did so unconditionally. And when she said she wanted me to be happy, really meant it. Now, it helped, of course, that I became a barrister. I'm wondering how delighted she'd be if I said I was becoming a body piercer or something. I'm sure she'd have said, as long as you're the best one, darling. But who knows? So, yeah, strong women. And I didn't believe a word that this woman was saying back to Helen.
Yeah.
Because all telly. So we're
Of
making
course.
a TV show. Yeah. Blah, blah, blah. I ended up taking a instruction in Jersey. Very interesting case where it was for the Jersey Independent Care Inquiry. And as you know, there's no separation between the judicial and the legislative branches of government.
Yeah.
And a colleague of mine in Chambers had been advising, who's now a High Court judge, the brilliant Bobby Chi McGrath.
Oh, yes. Yeah, she's amazing.
Oh.
So she came last year to speak at our annual dinner. And
She's completely
wonderful.
Thing about Bobby, or Bobs as I call her, is that, I've known her for years and years, and it doesn't matter what we're talking about. I never feel I do well in the conversation. It's just, there's certain people like, Brenda Hale, Lady Justice Hale, Lady Hale, when you meet her, I just walk away. Some of you will know this reference from Dirty Dancing. I always, when I see Bobby Chi McGrath, I always walk away thinking, oh, I carried a watermelon. I just didn't do well. Please think I'm clever, Bobby. Anyway, so she'd been doing this particular job, and I sort of took over from her. And it was fascinating because they don't have separation between the legislative and the judicial branches of government, they needed someone to manage the disclosure process. So I started doing that. Then I flew to Manchester. There was a court with my name on it. I thought, what is going on? Right, oh my gosh. And these were arbitrations and real deal arbitrations.
Yeah, yes.
Case number 1, a woman was suing her wedding photographer. And I thought, oh my goodness, my opening remark was, Madam, I'm very glad you've brought your mother here to support you. That's my sister. Case number 2, and of course I had to give full judgment, right?
Yes.
Case number 2, and this was a really important one. You talk about strong women. The person who was really she was at the start of the show. Her name's Kate Broadhurst. She's the executive producer of my show. All the people that run it, apart from Tom, are all women, and Kate's hugely influential in setting the whole thing up.
Interesting.
And she's from the Black Country, and I'll never forget it. They're not supposed to speak in my ear because we're regulated by Ofcom. So where I say there's a judgment coming, they can't say anything to influence a judgment. They can talk about evidence coming up and that sort of thing, so we can curate a television programme.
Oh, right.
But in general terms, they're certainly not allowed to interfere with any of the evidence that I'm hearing, except on this one occasion where, talk about privilege. By this stage, I've been dealing either defending in or prosecuting cases worth millions, sometimes billions of dollars. I find myself in front of two people saying something like, oh, well, this case is worth £100. That's not a lot of money. She's not supposed to speak in my ear, and the voice from the Black Country comes, do you want to rephrase that? You sound like a right posh bleep. And of course she was right. She was right. And of course that's been yet more privilege layered on more privilege. Perhaps the most important, actually, in terms of my career, believe it or not, which is that I've been given this unusual chance, this opportunity to hear, to experience, to see, to touch people's lives and to meet people from communities that I never would have met.
Yes.
To understand what it means to fill in a universal credit form. I can't do that.
No.
And I'm no intellectual slouch. I'm not a genius. But boy, is it tough. To see case after case, thousands of them,
Yes.
where £1,000, £500 can be the underlying reason for the toxic breakup of a family. To see case after case of, usually it's a female partner, in fact in 99% of the cases,
Yes.
where they've had no access to legal aid in a family dispute and they've just been left and unhelped entirely with thousands and thousands of pounds worth of debt and no way of pursuing their partner for maintenance payments, for in family disputes, you name it. And the privilege of meeting people from those communities, I think above all else gave me or has given me a sense of perspective, both of my own privilege, especially my London privilege.
Coming up north.
Right. Not just north, no, because the cases come from all over.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
But also just that sense of the lived experiences of communities, millions of people, whose lives I knew little, if nothing, about.
And has that, I was going to ask you a question about diversity, which we always ask.
Right.
But that's broadened I suppose, the diversity of people that you dealt with,
Certainly.
Post the bar as opposed to pre the bar, do you think?
It's a difficult one. It depends what you mean by diversity. It's such a complex question.
Yes, it is.
When I was growing up, and I've discussed this with friends, for me, living in London, people talk about intersectionality and then they kind of, dive under the table.
Yes, they do.
With embarrassment. I don't think you should. I think it's quite important. But it's a kind of useful way of I guess, assessing how people have experienced the world and how they've come to be who they are.
Who they are, yeah.
Right. I don't think at all it's an oppression Olympics. That's just a way people want to dismiss, people who have had more challenging experiences.
Yeah.
But when I was growing up, and I feel sure that this is the case for a lot of my friends, and to some extent, perhaps it's true now. I'm not sure, I'm never sure, but I think in our country, the most important, most damaging, and perhaps the most critical of the intersections is class. So when I grew up, right, it's nonsense. You should never trust anybody that says, I don't see colour.
Yes, I agree.
So ridiculous.
Yes, it is.
Right, but the question is the extent to which it mattered, and certainly my mum would be way more happy with us playing with the Nigerian doctor's family. Go and play with them.
Yeah.
It was great. As opposed, the family down the road, his dad's been in prison.
Oh, yeah.
And didn't have books. That was it. It was aspiration. That mattered a great deal more than anything else. So in terms of diversity, I suppose I've seen, a different, if you like, range of people from different backgrounds. And I'm still convinced that the most challenging dynamic to overcome is the class that you are born into.
Yes.
That affects everything, much more profoundly than any other. And then you layer on other things.
Yes.
To be sure. But for me, I feel that that's at the kind of centre of some of our challenges. And it's especially true now. I see case after case of students crippled with £50,000 worth of debt. I see families who could have solved their problems if they had access to some kind of network. If you think about all of us, right?
Yeah.
I want to talk about privilege, right? I have a mentoree. She's an incredible young person. Just meet her. She's doing so well. She's got a bunch of pupillage interviews. I'm so proud of her.
Aww.
She comes from a background. She's first generation. She's done brilliantly at university. She knew absolutely no one to get work experience. You see it in television too. In London, you see far too commonly shiny-haired examples of nepotism. Not necessarily because they're any worse intellectually. It's just that they've jumped through perhaps the same hoops as other people.
Yes.
But they know somebody through 1 or 2 or even 3 degrees of separation who have given them access to work experience. It's true of every kind of outcome. I've seen case after case of a mum struggling to get perhaps their kid who's got educational special needs and challenges statemented.
Yeah.
Well, the difficulty is that at every hurdle, somebody's told them no. And in some instances, when that no looks like the face of authority, perhaps white authority,
yes,
the response is, okay. Not because the mum doesn't want to fight, because she's got nowhere to go.
Yeah.
Right? And that's a story of so many people who are disenfranchised. I think we'll discover, I don't know, but I intuitively suspect that's a story of Grenfell too.
Yes.
Story of you starting up an organisation, you not being sure, but you not having the muscle, the might, the capacity to say no to authority.
Yeah. Yes.
And say that. And that's the reality against a backdrop of dwindling legal aid.
Yes. Which I know you're still very passionate about.
Lack of access to power.
Yes.
What does that say about who we are? What does that say about a country that my grandfather loved because everybody had equal access to the law?
Yes, and to justice. Interesting. Can I ask you, Rob, a couple of questions, really? I know we always ask these, but what do you do for well-being? I mentioned that Women in the Law saw you singing at Bridgewater Hall in Manchester with the BBC Breakfast team.
I know, let's not go mad. That was a disaster.
No, I had a bet that, people saying, can you sing? And you were wonderful. And I wondered, was that one of the things, what do you do for well-being and
Again,
relaxing?
I think you might be overstating your case a lot.
I was there.
Were you?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I was there.
You didn't put cheese in your ears like they used to do in LO Alert?
No, I was there. There was a huge gospel choir. Wayne Ellington had invited me.
Isn't he wonderful?
He was so wonderful. And it was wonderful.
Well, I was invited to put bums on seats, I think, but there you are. Not long after Strictly, so people would show up and watch me do anything.
Yes, well, maybe dancing is that what you do for relax? Because we're brilliant on that.
Again, I mean, I think that you're biased. You have to declare you're biased. I was not good. I just love doing it because of all of this free stuff you get for the dubious something of being on the telly, free dancing lessons, free access to your family history. I mean...
Yes, that was particularly interesting.
Gift after gift after gift after gift, which is why I've got 0 times zilch for people in the public eye, especially so-called celebrities who grumble when people stop them in the street and ask them for selfies. I think to myself, pull yourself together or get a good job. Or get a real job, I should say. Talking of the Strictly, the hard part of that is people kept saying to me during the whole thing, oh, you must be working so hard.
Yeah.
And of course, the hard part is that most of my girlfriends are barristers, many of whom, are working mums.
Yeah.
And it's like, working hard. The difficult part was it's not exactly easy to conscript your friends into feeling sorry for you. I remember phoning my friend Gudrun Young, who's a brilliant barrister who had 2 kids. I think she went back to do a murder trial about 9 days after her first was born.
Oh, God.
Right. And I telephoned her, and said, how's things? And she's got, 1 kid screaming, hanging off her arm. She'd been up all night reading the evidence in some hideously complicated trial, running off to court with sick down her leg. And, everyone's screaming and I can hear this hullabaloo in the background. And I say, well, I can't get this cha-cha right. And all of the press going, oh, yes, he must be working real hard. Yeah, real hard. It's a nightmare. Anyway, so what do I do for relaxation?
Yeah.
Exercise. That's everything to me.
Right.
So, I I can plonk on most musical instruments badly, really badly. I'm pretty useless at that. But I love exercise. When I was at my most depressed, exercise was hugely important to me. And I, put on a lot of weight in my 20s, decided to enter a triathlon and got super fit for it, and then kind of integrated it into my daily life. And then about 7 years ago, another brilliant barrister, Adina Ezekiel. I'm not sure if you know the brilliant Adina.
I don't actually.
She's amazing. She's sort of, I don't know, she's sort of terrifying and fabulous in equal measure, just everything I love. She took me to Barry's boot camp where I go most days.
Oh, yes, it's so tough.
I know, but I love it because at the end it's difficult, but it's a one good news story you can tell about yourself for the day. It's something you can, tick off the list, so to speak.
Oh, well, the clerks in my chambers go and they'll be delighted to hear. Yeah, I tried it and I was hopeless, so I've stuck to Bikram yoga.
I tried that. I did that every day for a month once.
Yeah, did you?
Yeah, years ago.
Wow.
Too sweaty. Plus it had carpet. I wasn't sure about the whole sweating on the carpet thing.
Oh, yes. I mean, I had the same conversation with Maxine Peake.
Oh, really?
The same thing. But
Yeah.
no, it's good to know because we encourage people to avoid burnout, certainly in the law,
Yeah.
to do
Was
different
very
things.
important. Well, I was burnt out, and that's really important. And actually, now my chambers has got much more, I'll put it in this way, mindful about wellness.
Yes.
And they've created a space, and it's become much more kind of present in the lives of barristers. I'm still a member of my chambers.
Brilliant.
But,
Might you return? Sorry to interrupt you.
I don't think I could. I'd, like I say earlier, I'd lost the joy and the delight of it. And, I love doing my court show. It's interesting because colleagues have come to watch the arbitrations.
Have they? I know. There's never any tickets.
You're welcome anytime. I had my head of chambers
you.
come and sit in the background. He's, brilliant at everything, but especially he was doing the health and safety case at the time. And I had a health and safety case in front of me. Oh, it's a nightmare. It's absolutely terrifying. My mouth went dry. It was a disaster. But, the interesting thing is that when lawyers do come, they often get really into it. And by getting into it, you might see 15 minutes of a case, but very often the arbitrations last for an hour, let's say. And if I've got a landlord and tenant dispute, I have to go through all of the law.
Oh, yeah.
I know. I mean, that's the bit where they never broadcast.
No.
Mainly because the audience is in a coma by the time I've dealt with the relevant statutory instrument that I'm dealing with. But, yeah, I think you'd be surprised. I really am. There's never a moment where I shut the door behind me thinking, will this be funny for telly? Even where the cases are, on the face of it, a little bit pantomime. I'm genuinely trying to apply legal principles.
Absolutely.
And that's why I suppose the show has survived, and why I suppose I wasn't murdered by my colleagues, because at the core of it, there is real legal integrity, and boy, do I care about that.
Yes, and actually you explain it so it's understandable to lay people, and I think that's part of the success of the show.
Right, well, it's all of our jobs. I mean, you know that as a barrister, or I'm not sure if you're a pupil master.
Oh, yes,
right.
Teaching the...
It's everything.
Yes, it is.
You often get that, especially now, I think, in pupillage interviews, where people come along and ask themselves the question, how would a barrister sound? And you feel it, and I don't know if it's got worse, but, they took the vehicle to the public house. Do you mean the car to the pub?
Yes, we have to do...
Right.
We have to correct that in advocacy training.
Right, all the time. But, it's an interesting thing. I don't know whether there's a connection here. When I started at the bar, intellectually, what you might say, in terms of academic credentials, things were a lot more diverse. The greats, so to speak, many of them went to universities now, which frankly wouldn't get you a look in the chambers that they're now heads of.
Yes.
In many cases, they didn't go anywhere near a university. Thinking of Orlando Pownall, one of the greatest advocates I've ever seen, David Waters, Stephen Camlish. None of them went to university.
Wow.
And yet they're amazing advocates.
Yes.
Because they themselves had to understand legal principles, make them decipherable to themselves, and so they understand how to explain it to ordinary people.
Yes.
That's what matters. It should matter to all of us.
Yes, it should.
Unless you do trusts, in which case, it's important that nobody understands it. I mean, it's just part of the fun of it. I mean,
I know. Gosh, trust law. I know. Do you have a favourite book? And also, do you have a favourite fictional lawyer?
Right. So my favourite fictional lawyer, the book one's impossible to answer. I mean, it's just impossible.
Too many.
I don't know where to begin. And also it changes as you get older. It used to be Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. And that's changed over the years. It's so difficult to know. I worry, if I'm ever asked that question. I've been on various shows about books. It's so difficult to choose.
Yes.
Sentimental education, maybe. I don't know. But lawyer, that's an easy one.
Oh.
I mean, that's a dead easy one. It was Anna from This Life, played by Daniela Nardini. In fact, This Life, to anybody that's of my sort of vintage, kind of late 90s, early 2000s school, did more for, I guess, promoting, or suggesting to people that they went to the bar. Inspiring them, perhaps. You never saw any court, by the way.
No, I know. They were always late for court.
They was late for court, and, they're having this kind of fabulous but sort of Baroque squalor life in this cool garrote style, just delight with one another. They're also gorgeous, Jack Davenport as Miles. But Daniela Nardini, who I've subsequently met.
Have you?
I know, and I blush from head to foot. It was the first time, I have to say, a woman's ever made me do that, but I really did. I was just overwhelmed. She was just so cool, and they were grown up, and they lived this fabulous life, and they did a fabulous kind of job, which seemed to kind of matter at the same time as they were vulnerable and chaotic. And, that's what I wanted to be, that sort of grown up,
Yes.
God, I loved her. She was amazing.
Oh, God, she was amazing. I know, and everyone cut their hair like her as well.
Yes.
Suddenly, we all had the same. Although I was thinking the other day, what about Ferdy? Do you remember Ferdy?
I remember Ferdy. He came
was he
along.
A courier?
He was a courier. He came along a little bit later, and he was having sex with Warren. I don't remember all this stuff. And of course, Egg, played by Andrew Lincoln.
Yes, he was my favourite.
I know, I've met him as well. Couldn't talk. I know, because the people that when you were young who are famous are the people that make you blush, not people who are famous that you meet when you're a grown-up. You meet Clooney or Cumberbatch. I mean, once the initial flush of recognition has disappeared, they're actors. You're in a coma after the first few sentences. What do they bring to the table? But meeting Andy Peters, I mean, that was a moment I needed to sit down.
Gosh, well, you must have met everybody now, really. I mean, people want to meet you.
I suppose it's such a gift. But like I say, when they're famous from when you're a kid and they say that they like you, I mean, that's just the best thing ever. I met Fluella Benjamin, Lady Benjamin.
Oh, did you?
I know. That was just too much.
Did you get a selfie?
I sort of wanted to, but I think we were sort of in the House of Lords and it felt a bit much, and I would have said something inappropriate because I've got no small talk. So I said, let's go through the round when I don't know. It would have gone horribly wrong.
I love that. Oh, gosh, you're so brilliant. I know.
You're brilliant.
We could have you for like 2 hours. It's been so wonderful for you to come on.
No, it's been a joy.
Podcast.
And thank you so much for having me. And, these podcasts are really, really important. It's an interesting thing, When I think got called, it was the first year that it was 50-50 women to men. I think it was about that in that year.
Yes.
It's about 20 years ago now.
Yeah.
But it is an interesting thing as I've watched, the trajectory of people's careers, how I've seen a number of women kind of disappear over the years.
Yeah, the retention is not,
Right. And especially, friends who, after they come back from maternity.
Yes.
How challenging it is.
Oh, gosh.
And especially the lack of support at the bar for that.
Yeah.
It's improving a little bit. But, there's so much talent that's been lost over the years because of that. I mean, real talent.
Yes.
Also, for a long time, it was super embarrassing because I used to go and do cases. Well, I did alongside American lawyers. There's a chance my show might go to America, and they would say, how many Supreme Court judges are women? And you'd say one. And for most of my time, I'd say none.
Yes. I
mean, that's not a kind of virtue signal, kids.
No.
It's just straightforward embarrassing.
Yes, it is.
You think now of the range and depth of talent.
I totally agree. I agree. And do you think we could do more? I mean, that's partly why we set up Women in the Law, just to give a bit of encouragement. If someone can listen to the podcast and think, actually, I'm all right. I can switch off, or I've taken comfort from the, downloaded. Do you think we could do more, and what could we do to
Definitely. There needs to be structural changes. I mean, the bar sort of worked, well, the bar is fine and the model is okay and it suits some people, but most of the people it suits, let's call it what it is, especially nowadays, are people of financial privilege.
Yeah.
You know, the reality is that my young mentoree, she's just exceptional. You know, I met her when she won a mooting competition and she was ready to go to court there and then.
Wow.
And,
I'll invite her on.
She's so fantastic. Proud of you, Shasmita. Keep going. Good luck in your pupillage interview this week.
Oh.
I hope she's done well. I'm so nervous. I feel like a dad.
I know. I bet you do.
Really
They're
do.
like children.
I know.
So just,
true.
you know, especially when they're young.
I know.
Oh, fingers crossed. Will tell us how she gets on,
Well,
because
I'll
everyone
find
will
out.
be rooting for her.
But, you know, I think about her and she's in tens of £1,000s worth of debt. You know, if she finds herself in a situation, like say she decides to have a child, etc.,
Yes.
I just don't know how sustainable the career is. And frankly, she has, I mean, not just clawed her way up to it, she's fought. She's battled every day. She's done everything that's asked of her. The least we could do would be to rethink the structures that do everything possible to support women,
Yeah.
to achieve their full potential.
Oh, absolutely. I've got 3 children and I know how hard it is. And that's part of what we need to be doing. You're spot on. You know, having positive role models as well, just to encourage as well as the structures. What a great suggestion. Well, I hope the Bar Council's listening. And
I'm sure they listen to me all the time. I mean, I can't get... You know, sometimes, you know, during the proroguing case, I mean, Lady Hale, if you're listening... I mean,
she's next. She's the next interviewee.
Well, I'm so sorry I didn't return any of your calls. I know how desperate you were for my advice. It came, you know, on the same day as the proroguing case, I had a case where a woman had brought her dentist onto court. And I wanted to know where in the country it was. I said, "Madam, can you tell me where you got your teeth done?" The answer was in my mouth. I thought, goodness me, I could have been sitting there alongside other greats in the Supreme Court.
I'm going to have to rewatch all of them now.
Some of them are great.
They're so great. Oh, thank you so much for your time.
It's
Will
been
you
a real
come back
privilege.
on?
I'd love to come back on. This has been joyous.
It's been wonderful having you, and thank you for sharing some of the personal stuff. Can I ask you, when is the film coming out about your grandfather and the documentary you've just made?
Right. So I did a Who Do You Think You Are last year,
Yes.
and, you know, they were very kind. It won a BAFTA.
It did. It was very emotional.
It was such a gift to be given that experience. And I've made 2 further films where second-generation survivors go back and discover their stories. And I also go back with my mum to Treblinka, where my family were murdered, to go and say Kaddish, the memorial prayer. And it was, without question, the most profound moment of my life, for reasons which I hope when people watch, they share in.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been a delight.
Thank you so much, Judge Rinder. What an awesome, awesome guy, and what an interesting background. I'm Sally Penny. You can find out more about Women in the Law UK by visiting our website, womeninthelawyuk.com. Find out who else is coming up on our podcasts, including Girlie Swat herself, Baroness Hale of Richmond, retired judge from the Supreme Court, Karma Melli QC, the secret barrister. No, I won't be revealing the identity of the secret barrister, but do tune in. And loads more people coming up. Don't forget you can listen to past podcasts on here, and you can also buy the Talking Law book, which celebrates 100 years of women being allowed to practice law and talks about the challenges still facing women now. Thank you for listening.